Sup guys, Bjorn here. I hope you're all doing fantastic. As you've all noticed, of course, 9.2 is finally live, and with the new patch comes a ton of new ways to gear. 9.2 is no exception. There's actually even more systems than usually 9.2 for you to gear with. There's a ton of stuff for the solo players. We also have tier sets, double legendaries. There's a lot of stuff to get into. So in order to not make the video too confusing, too long, I've divided it into two sections. First, we're going to take a look at the solo player content. For the casuals out there, this is mostly going to be below 252 item level, and most of the sources are going to come from like solo focused play, maybe some outdoor content in Zereth Mortis, etc, etc. Then we're going to move on to group content, a bit more min-max oriented. Here we're mostly going to take a look at item levels above 252, so where you get the best possible gear in 9.2. We're also going to take a look at the timeline of the first few weeks of the patch, so that you know exactly when and where you need to do everything in order to be as efficient as possible with your gearing. We're also going to give you some tips on stat optimization, what gear to pick from the Great Vault, and we're taking a look at tier sets in this section as well. So if you're a casual who wants your tier set, make sure to stick around for the very first portion of the min-max oriented section. Then when we're through with all of that, at the very end, we're also going to touch on the creation catalyst. This has big implications for casuals, for PvPers, and even for the raiders who've maybe already acquired their tier set. That's where we're taking a look at it last. Finally, if you end up enjoying this guide, make sure you subscribe down below. That would really help me out. It would allow me to continue making these videos, which is really what I want to do. And it's also going to let you guys know whenever I upload these guides, so you never have to miss another one of these again. Alright, thanks a lot and stay tuned. So let's start off with the world content here, the solo casual player section. There's a lot of stuff to cover here when it comes to 9.2, and for the casual solo players out there, I think this is going to be one of your best patches in a long while, actually. A lot better than all of the previous Shadowlands patches, and probably better than most of the BFA patches as well. So quite a lot of good stuff here. And we're starting with the very lowest item level. If you go to Zereth Mortis in Haven, there's a broker selling 226 account-wide gear. So this is great for alts. If you have a bit of excess anima, as I'm sure we all have by now, right? You can just send over as many pieces as you want. They are slot specific as well, so you can target whichever slots you want, which is great. Then we have some 226 and 229 greens. These comes from various sources around Zereth Mortis. You'll just loot them from like killing ordinary mobs, quests, treasures, rares, whatever it can be. Let's start moving up the item levels a little bit. We have 236 blues, also dropped by all of those same sources in Zereth Mortis. This is most likely gonna come from rares and treasures, right? Because they're a little bit higher item level. And on a similar note, there are actually also 246 epic weapons dropping in Zereth Mortis. Now, I've only been able to loot it off of one single rare, that is Ishka, in the very upper parts of the sand area. So I'm not sure if any other rares actually drop 246 weapons, but you should definitely go kill Ishka whenever she's up, because 246 epic weapon on an alt can be really strong to just get you started right off the bat. Now we're moving from the random drops to more targeted gear. So the first actual gearing system for casuals and solo players in 9.2 is the Sandworn gear. This is 246 item level epics, and they are sold in Pilgrim's Grace. Now they are sold with, or they're rather bought with, sand-worn relics, and these can be found from some various sources, but they are all in that upper sand area of Zereth Mortis. You'll get them from dailies, so you should definitely be looking out for dailies every single day in Zereth Mortis. The better source is going to be sand rares in that upper area, right? All of the rares in that area, or at least most of them, drop some relics. Now, these are also going to be fairly low numbers, right? Anywhere from 3 to 6 relics per rare. The final way to get these, and the most reliable way to get these relics, is by opening your daily Sandworn chest. This is a chest that is also in this upper sand area, and you will get it by obtaining 5 Sandworn chest fragments, combining them into one key, and you can open it once a day. In order to get the key fragments, you will need to kill elites and just random Maasworn mobs in that sand area. So ordinary mobs can drop it, but I would definitely advise killing elites here. So you would want to maybe group up to a 5-man farm group and kill those. If you're a die-hard solo player and you want to get these fragments, I found one really nice way. Now, if you're a really strong character, you can probably just go and solo the elites, right? They're not really that difficult. But if you're a bit more of a cursed character with a bit of a lower item level, which is the characters that would want this 246 item level gear, right? So you're quite likely to be low geared when you're running around there. In that case, there is one world quest that was up yesterday where you will have to summon a little worm and he will eat the sandworm elites in that area. Now, you can only kill 10 of them before that disappears, but if you actually only kill the Nathrasim Arcanists, or Arcanists, the Nathrasim Flying Boys in there, they don't count towards the world quest completion. So you can just keep killing those with the worms over and over again. The worms will pretty much one-shot those mobs. So it's a really, really nice little way of farming sandworm key fragments there, and you can only carry 5 of these key fragments at one time, but you can convert the fragments into a key and then loot 5 new ones. So you can actually farm this and stack them up for future days, which is really, really nice. These sandworm gear pieces cost a lot. They cost between 160 and 300 relics, so there's gonna be quite a while before you get one of these items, even if you're farming for it, but it does have a pretty decent starting item level for alts or just for solo players, casual players who are maybe below 246 right now. This can still be a pretty decent targeted way for you to get maybe a piece or two later down the line in the patch. And finally, we've arrived at what I consider at least to be the best solo or casual player gearing system in 9.2, the Cypher equipment. You probably already have some of these pieces, so you probably already know what I'm talking about here, but we'll get through exactly how you get the gear, how you upgrade it, what the bonuses are, and what you can do with it to get even stronger. Well, first of all, the gear starts at 233, so it isn't really that great to begin with, but the item level and the bonuses scale with the Cypher of the First One's research system. So that console in Exile's Hollow, you'll need to go there and upgrade that as much as possible in order to get 252 eye level on this. Technically, the currency that you'll use to upgrade Cypher is uncapped, so you could just grind this out ASAP if you wanted to, and the currency itself is rewarded from most Zereth Mortis activities, but mainly dailies, treasures, rares, and also the puzzle chests that are dotted around Zereth Mortis. So pretty much anything you'll just do in the open world zone will get you some of these. So let's take a look at where you get the actual gear. Well, you'll get quite a lot of it from the 9.2 campaign, but most importantly, of course, Zereth Mortis activities. And these are pretty much anything you do in Zereth Mortis. You can drop from the weekly quest, the rares, can drop from the treasures, and even some of the world quests will reward you with Cypher equipment. So you should be able to get quite a lot of these pieces quite quickly if you're just doing Zereth Mortis content. In addition to the eye level scaling, the gear actually also has unique outdoor bonuses that only works in outdoor Shadowlands zones, and these bonuses also scale with the Cypher level. There's a lot of pretty unique and inspired stuff here, I have to say. These bonuses surprised me personally. I think they were actually pretty cool. We had stuff like a rocket jump, mount speed, movement speed, etc., some extra damage. Well, in addition to these bonuses, you can actually also, in the Cypher of the First One itself, upgrade so that you can socket the empowerments that you get from that Cypher into the gear itself. So instead of having a temporary empowerment in the outer zone, you'll be able to socket that empowerment into your specific gear piece, which means that you will have a permanent outer bonus. And this means that you can craft yourself as a casual player who enjoys the outer world, who enjoys Zereth Mortis, because Zereth Mortis as well is also a very, very good zone, I have to say, all things considered. So this gearing system has a nice support structure in place to keep you interested in the zone and actually wanting to acquire this gear, right? Once you have it, you will have a very well customized outdoor gear set full of unique bonuses that you can pretty much decide yourself what you want to equip. You can socket additional empowerments into those gear pieces, and you'll have a gear set that is maybe even stronger than some of the better item level gear in that outdoor content. All in all, I think this Cypher system is great for solo players, for casual players. It provides a very, very steady progression curve over the course of the patch, with the optional option of just farming it ASAP. If you really want that 252 gear instantly, you can just grind out some hundreds of Cyphers right at a time. There's no cap on it. Alright, so that is pretty much all of the sources at or below 252 in the new patch. So here is where the fun begins, in my opinion at least. Let's try to get some better gear. There's just two things I wanted to mention before we get into the more min-maxy part of the guide, because there are two more things that you as a casual player can do to gain item levels above 252 without necessarily having to do group content. First of all, we have unique equipped crafted gear in 9.2. This is actually a bit better than usual. It starts at, or rather it is at item level 262, which is a really nice upgrade. You'll be able to just buy one of these ASAP. So yeah, keep an eye out on the auction house for that. Should be at the start of this week here. And secondly, the world boss is also becoming available, right? So this drops 259 gear, very easy for a solo player to just group up in the group finder, complete that, and you'll get a nice chance at a 259 item every single week. Okay, let's move into the min-max section of the guide. This is going to be mostly above 252 for you who are doing group content. And here we're also gonna just overview the new systems coming in 9.2, i.e. the tier sets and the double legendaries, because these actually have quite a big impact on your gearing journey in the new patch. Tier gear is the new hot girl in town in 9.2. Everyone's looking to get a piece of it, or more specifically 4 pieces of it. You can get the tier sets from a few different sources in 9.2, but the main one is still gonna be raiding. Halondrus drops your pants, Lihivum drops your hands, Anduin will drop your helm, and then Rygalon will drop chest, and Lords of Dread shoulders. From this list already we can see that all tier gear in 9.2 is not created equal. Some of it will be able to be obtained week 1 whenever those first 8 bosses opens up, but your chest and your shoulders specifically are not even available week 1, which understandably is going to make those pieces a lot more sought after whenever the next weeks of raid opens up. From this I've created a small tier gear tier list here. This is obviously going to depend on your stats as a specific class, but just as a general notion here, pants and hands come very early in the raid, so they're probably the lowest tier. Your helm is still from the 8th boss, so not too bad all things considered. It's also a very stat heavy slot there with the helmet. And then your chest and your shoulders, if you can get them week 2, week 3, those are going to be super good because the sources for those items are just so limited. The next way you can get tier sets in 9.2 is going to be through the Great Vault. And the Great Vault was changed by Blizzard this very week going into 9.2. The raid requirements went from 369 bosses to 258 bosses, which is really good. It also means that you can get 3 slots just by clearing the first 8 bosses week 1, which is all you can clear. So very good change by Blizzard there. In order to please the Mythic Plus community and PvP community a little bit as well, they lowered the dungeon requirement for the 3rd slot from 10 to 8 dungeons, and the PvP requirement from 6,250 honor to 5,500. So definitely a very nice thing there for pretty much everyone going into 9.2. It's going to be a lot less punishing to farm every single slot of the Great Vault, which, spoiler alert, you're probably going to want to do. In terms of the tier set drop chance, Squishy from Wowhead did some testing a couple of weeks back, and he found about a 6% chance per slot. Now, we aren't sure exactly how this works or if the numbers are correct, but it can be a quite nice hallmark. This means that you're not really that likely to get tier sets from the Great Vault itself, but Blizzard also specified that if you actually kill a boss that drops a tier piece, you're gonna have a higher chance of seeing that tier piece show up in the Great Vault. So actually clearing raid here is even more important than it seems. And then the very last way to get tier gear is, of course, through the creation catalyst, which, as I said, we'll talk about in the very last section of the guide. The other factor outside of tier sets going into 9.2 is, of course, that we'll get the 2nd legendary, and you'll also get a new Lego rank of 291 item level. The 2nd Legos, together with the tier sets, actually influence our gearing quite a lot in 9.2, because there's a ton of slots that needs to be covered, right? You have 5 tier gear slots, along with 2 legendary slots. There's not going to be a whole lot of gear slots left for you to actually optimize your stats, or for you to actually look for bis gear that drops from any other source than raid. So with that in mind, the gearing situation, especially when choosing items out of the Great Vault, becomes quite convoluted in 9.2. Alright, with the basic systems out of the way, let's take a look at the actual timeline for the first few weeks of the patch, what you're gonna want to do when, and where you can actually see the biggest benefits to your item level, to your stats, and to your overall gear in 9.2. Well, first of all, we have Heroic Week, right? And this might already be live depending on when you're watching this. It is likely to be the very most hectic week of the entire patch. You have a ton of stuff to get done here, so let's get straight into it. What actually unlocks during the week? Well, Shadowlands Season 3 goes live. The first 8 bosses on Normal and Heroic in the new raid becomes available. And obviously PvP season, Mythic Plus season, it's also the first week you can actually work towards your vault in 9.2. So what does the priority look like? Where do you start in Heroic Week? Well, first of all, the world boss is also up, so you should definitely go kill that for 259 item level ASAP. Then you should look to clear 8 bosses on normal, 8 bosses on heroic. This is the very, very most important thing that you get done in the first week, because it gives you full vault from the raid obviously, but more crucially it gives you a very, very high chance of getting some tier week 1 with clearing all of those bosses, and also buffing your chance to see tier in the Great Vault itself. When it comes to the Mythic Plus Vault, you will also want to get 3 out of 3 slots obviously. The slots were recently lowered to only requiring 8 dungeons, as I said, this should be a little bit more attainable. Ideally you would want to get 8 plus 15s done. This can be quite challenging, depending on who you are, who you're playing with obviously. Even if you just get like 8 plus 10s done or whatever, it's still, in my opinion, worth it, because you will still have the chance to see a tier piece in that slot, right? It might be a little bit lower item level, sure, but it's still gonna be worth the upgrade for you to get tier, even though the item level is a little bit lower. So even if you can't manage the plus 15s week 1, I would still suggest that you get 8 dungeons done at whatever level you can manage. And then, of course, we have the PvP vault slots. These are, in my opinion, still not really optional, because it's just gonna be that strong to get your tier set early on, right? So I'm personally probably gonna be farming out all of my PvP vault slots as well, but out of the priority here, the PvP vault slots is definitely the lowest one. If you're gonna drop any of the slots, you should definitely drop the PvP ones, because you aren't really getting any gear from doing the PvP itself, right? And you're also not really getting well statted gear, and not getting gear with good item level either. Outside of the vault week 1, the main thing you should be doing is still just farming your Biz trinkets from Mythic Plus, right? The item level at end of dungeon is actually capped at a plus 10 level week 1, so you can only get 255 item level here, but getting a Biz trinket at 255 is still going to be really nice, because then you can save up some valor and upgrade it later on if you really want to. You've also got to keep in mind that the Great Vault is now diluted by the tier gear, and you also have 2 new dungeons in Tasavesh lower and upper, which means that actually getting your hands on your Biz trinkets from the Great Vault might be a lot more difficult than last patch, and last patch it was already quite difficult, so you should definitely start farming your Biz trinkets as soon as possible. Just getting a Biz trinket at a lower item level might very well be really good going into 9.2, just because of how difficult they're going to be to acquire through the Great Vault. If you've completed all of this content and you're still looking for stuff to do in Heroic Week, then the last thing you should do is to work your Mythic Plus score, or obviously PvP rating if you're doing PvP, but you should work on your rating in the Shadowlands Season 3 to make sure that you can upgrade your gear later on when you have more Valor or Conquest. A thing to note there, if you're a Mythic Pluser, is that obviously the first week is going to be a Tyrannical week, so make sure that you get all the 15s done on Tyrannical that week if you want to min-max your score. That means that you can get Keystone Master and Keystone Hero and stuff like that much easier next week. If you're missing one of those Tyrannical dungeons, or sorry, there are 10 dungeons now with Tasavesh lower and upper, so you should look to get all 10 dungeons completed in the first week if you can. That will put you at a very nice baseline in terms of score for you to acquire all of your achievements in the next week. Speaking of that, let's move into Mythic Week, and there's a lot of stuff going on here again, but the first thing you'll encounter is your first Shadowlands Season 3 Vault, and here you'll face some pretty difficult decisions maybe, because remember, you can see your tier pants here, you can see your tier hands and your tier helmet, but all the other pieces are locked, and you might have to choose between one of those more low value tier pieces compared to maybe a 278 weapon or a 278 trinket or something like that. First of all, I think that if you don't really have any great weapons or trinkets in your vault, you should pretty much always pick a tier piece if you have one, because not only is it a big power gain most likely, but you will also be able to trade tier to your raid group whenever you clear the raid on Mythic Week. So that's a very high value for your raid group and for yourself individually as well. However, if you have a 278 weapon, a 278 Biz trinket in there, then things start becoming a lot more convoluted. I would probably personally pick a 278 weapon, a 278 trinket over one of these 3 low value tier pieces, because first of all, it's going to be very difficult for you to find a 278 weapon, 278 trinket from the Great Vault in the first place. Secondly, early on those are usually really big damage increases as well, and maybe the most important reason is that the tier set is quite attainable, especially those 3 first pieces, right, in the later weeks. You can run LFR, you can do loot trading in normal, you can run heroic again, you can do a lot of stuff, right, you can start clearing mythic. So weapons and biz trinkets is probably still my #1 priority here, at least in the first week. A bigger thing to keep in mind though is that you should definitely avoid picking items in your tier slots or in your double legendary slots. There are 7 total slots covered there, so there's quite a lot to think about. Definitely don't pick up like a 278 mediocrely statted piece of shoulders or whatever. That's gonna be very bad once you drop your tier shoulders. Even if they're lower item level, you're definitely gonna want to equip those obviously for the tier set. An additional caveat to that is that obviously during week 8, when the creation catalyst becomes available, you can turn those 278 chest pieces or legs or whatever that you get from the Great Vault into actual tier gear. So if you have a well-statted piece that you know you're going to be able to turn in week 8, then maybe it's not the worst thing in the world after all. Let's get into what actually changes in terms of gearing in Mythic Week. Well, first of all, the last 3 bosses opens up in the new raid, as well as the whole of Mythic difficulty. So you'll have, again, just a ton of raid to do in this week. You will want to full clear normal, full clear heroic, and maybe start working towards Mythic as well if you can. That is obviously probably going to be quite difficult for most guilds. This is going to give you the very best chance possible to get tier gear here, and in addition to clearing the raid, you obviously also still want to have 3 out of 3 vault slots on pretty much PvP, Mythic Plus and Raid, because of how important the tier set really is. Mythic Plus gear is also raised to 262 item level at the end of dungeon, so this week it's gonna become maybe a bit more lucrative to farm as much Mythic Plus gear as you can, and to really try to fill out those slots that you haven't found yet with some decent 262 Mythic Plus gear that you can then also upgrade. In terms of Valor, I would definitely save it unless you have a Biz Trinket or a weapon maybe potentially to spend it on. No. Scratch that. Don't spend it on a weapon. You only spend it on basically biz trinkets, or if you have something crazy that I can't predict right now that might be really good for you. One thing that is a lot more huge than you might initially think is that LFR Wing 1 opens, and this contains the pants for your tier set. So if you haven't found your pants yet by Mythic Week, you should definitely start the week by just running LFR Wing 1, try to get your tier pants as soon as possible. If you've completed all of this and you still have some time left, then this is the perfect week to get your score achievements, because this is the second week of the season, right? We'll have 1 tyrannical week, 1 fortified week right after, which means that now is where you can actually get your score up to 2k, 3k, get your Keystone Hero, get your Keystone Master if you want that. And once you have those, you can also upgrade your Myth Plus gear all the way to 272, which is maybe going to be really nice if you have a good trinket already. There's not a lot changing at all in the week after Mythic Week, but I'll still cover it just for the sake of it. This is going to be your second vault in Shadowlands Season 3, and again here, choose your weapon, your trinket if you have those, otherwise a tier piece. And here, chest and shoulders are going to be a lot more valuable than the first 3, because the first 3 are most likely a lot more farmable for you, as well as showing up in LFR. Speaking of LFR, LFR Wing 2 opens up this week, so that drops the tier piece hands, which means that if you don't have tier hands already, you should definitely do LFR Wing 2. Other than that, just do what you've been doing so far, get your weekly vaults, every single slot of them if you don't have your tier set already, and also work towards score, obviously, if you have nothing else to do. Next up we have week 5 of the patch, and here things are starting to get a little bit crazy again. The double legendary unlocks, and I also think that this is where the 291 upgrade becomes available to the Shadowlands legendaries, so you could craft that right away to get a pretty nice item level upgrade, obviously. The one thing to keep in mind here is that you want to make sure you're revered with the Enlightened reputation by week 5, because when that campaign chapter 7 becomes available, when you do that, you will be given the 265 Haste Mastery second legendary belt. And if you are revered, you can just purchase the memory from the Quartermaster, and then you can recraft that legendary from 265 all the way up to 291 in whatever slot you want. So it's going to be a huge gain both in item level, in stats obviously, because you can optimize your stats on it as well, and you're probably going to maybe replace a piece that's even lower item level as well. So this is a trifold gain here. Now if you can't spare the gold, because the legendaries are probably going to be pretty goddamn expensive, at least by this point, then you can obviously just also keep the Haste Mastery belt. It isn't a huge deal. This week the 278 conduit upgrade item also unlocks, and this is 278 conduits across your character, all of them, so this is actually a pretty goddamn big DPS game for most specs. Now you will need 3000 Mythic Plus score, Gladiator or Mythic Jailer in order to unlock it, so quite a very small percentage of the player base here. Personally, I think I'm actually going to be working towards this. This sounds like a pretty fun milestone. If you are able to knock it out early, you'll get the 278 conduits pretty early, and you can start doing some more damage in maybe Mythic Sepulcher. And the very last thing that happens in week 5, that is actually very relevant for our progression, is LFR Wing 3 opens. This might sound a little bit troll, but due to how they actually structure the raid instance in LFR this patch, Wing 3 is a very lucrative wing. It includes Anduin for the tier piece helmet, it includes Lords of Dread for the shoulders, and it also includes Rygolon for the chest. So all of the difficult tier pieces to get in 9.2 is just nicely grouped into one LFR wing. This means that running LFR Wing 3, if you don't have your tier set already, is going to be the single best way to get it in terms of time investment. I think it's really strong, so definitely keep an eye out for LFR Wing 3. Now, apart from that, you still want to obviously be doing all of your Great Vault stuff, whatever you're doing to gearing in the previous weeks, in week 5. And from here on, nothing else is going to change until the Creation Catalyst. So that's it for the min-max portion of the guide. Let's jump to the very last point here with the Creation Catalyst and how you can use it to get some extra advantages in 9.2, how you can think about the tier sets maybe long-term, short-term, and what you want to do when the Creation Catalyst opens. Well, the Creation Catalyst opens in week 8, and at that point, you are going to be able to craft your own tier gear at that Creation Catalyst, and the rate of it is going to speed up over time. So first, it's only going to be one tier piece per week, but then it's going to start accumulating a bit faster, and you will be able to craft your full tier sets maybe in 2 or 3 weeks if you don't have any pieces already. But this is actually more than just a catch-up feature or a casual player feature, because remember, we can turn any Shadowlands Season 3 gear into tier gear with this, which means that we can actually potentially replace poorly statted tier pieces that we've looted from raid or from the Great Vault with bis statted Mythic Plus items that we then turn into tier gear. So I think the Creation Catalyst will have a lot of value for pretty much everyone in the game at that point. You are crafting the tier pieces with Cosmic Flux. That is the same resource that you'll use for the legendaries, but keep in mind that's an uncapped resource in 9.2 that comes from pretty much every single piece of content you're doing, be it Mythic Plus, PvP, Raid, Zereth Mortis, etc. So you'll probably have a ton of Cosmic Flux by this point, by week 8, so I don't think you'll need to save Cosmic Flux in order to craft tier or anything like that. I think you should be completely fine here. Okay guys, that was the gearing in 9.2 covered. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from it. If you want to see more content, please subscribe and like the video. That would help me out a ton. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. Huh? Oh, you're still here. Well, I'm sorry. I think you should probably go and check out a video maybe over here or somewhere here. You can even subscribe down here. That would be really nice. I would highly appreciate that. I'm gonna go snort some more lines. See ya.